this was a segment that you and I kind of kicked around over text, Harmon. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to talk about who we would like to see the Canucks add via trade. And when you and I were throwing out names, a lot of the time it came down to, okay, I like this guy stylistically for the Canucks. He would help them big time, but he's either probably not going to be available or it would cost a lot to get him. And I also want to throw this out there, though, that to some extent, everybody's available in the NHL, right? Like Filip Hronek. Nobody knew about Filip Hronek last year until the trade came down. And of course, Detroit made him available, but nobody was expecting Detroit to make him available. So GMs have change of hearts. Like, this stuff happens. So I want to look, and I don't want to come at it with, oh, well, this person hasn't been in the news as somebody who might be available. And of course, there's going to be some names like that have been in rumors in the rumor mill as being available, but there's also going to be a couple names that just we look at and we say, yeah, this would be a really nice stylistic fit and it might help this team big time to go get this guy. Again, there's going to be two separate ones. We're going to do one player each, Harmon, where we take into consideration acquisition cost. And then there's one that's just, it's like the Christmas wish. It's like how I said Elias Lindholm in December, where I just said, I don't care what it costs. I'm hoping Santa puts it under the tree, not that you have to give up anything for it. So I'm not going to say Lindholm either. Like, I'm not going to go with Elias Lindholm. But where do you want to start? Do you want to start with our pie in the sky ones, or do you want to start with
Let's start with pie in the sky.
Okay. So I texted you about Eriksson Ek today. Is that who you have?
I don't, because even for pie in the sky, I just don't think the Wild are going to move him at all.
Do you know what pie in the sky means?
Yeah, but it still has to be like, what are you going to say for your pick then? Connor McDavid? Like, come on. It's got to be a player that could at least feasibly become available. And that's the thing, because yeah, Eriksson Ek is a stud two-way centerman. He's a Selke type player that can also put up, 30 goals, 60 plus points. If you added that type of player to this Canucks roster, it's not even a debate anymore, I think, in terms of whether they'd be a true contender or not. But I just can't see why Minnesota would give him up, because they're not in a rebuilding mode. Yeah, they've had an off year, but they're still looking to contend in the timeline that they have Kirill Kaprizov locked up. And Eriksson Ek is, if he's not he's probably their second most important player behind Kaprizov. And in fact, Dean Evison, when he was fired at the end during the middle of the season, did an interview with athletic colleague Michael Russo. He called Eriksson Ek their most important player ahead of Kaprizov. So there's just no way Minnesota dangles him.
Okay, then I'll go with my second one. Leon Draisaitl. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, okay. So one of them was Eriksson Ek for me. Like, that was one of the pie in the sky ones. But obviously the other one, Elias Lindholm. I brought two. Elias Lindholm. I still am throwing it out there. And we're hearing Jake Gensel's name a lot. Is Jake Gensel one of your names? Because if not, we'll just quickly. Okay, then perfect. I'll throw it to you then. Who your pie in the sky? Is it Jake Gensel?
Yeah, it is. Okay. And I'm sure we'll get to why I actually don't think, based off cost, the Canucks should make a play for him. But if we're forgetting what acquisition costs for a second here, he's the real deal. This is the best winger Sidney Crosby has ever played with. He's a player that has put up 40-goal seasons, can play at a point-per-game pace. He has elite hockey sense, which means I'm so confident that he'd be the perfect fit next to Elias Pettersson, the exact type of player that would fit well. Because, look, some players, they have the scoring ability, but you wonder about the stylistic fit with certain players. That's not a question in my mind with Gensel at all, because you watch the Penguins play, and the way him and Crosby play off of each other in the offensive zone, some of the passing plays that they can pull off is unreal. And it's not just Crosby driving the bus himself and Gensel's riding his coattails. No, legitimately, Gensel makes Crosby better too, which for a fit next to Elias Pettersson, making him happy. You think Elias Pettersson, before the lotto line got United, was happy playing with Ilya Mikheyev and Sam Lafferty? You want to think about how happy he'd be to have a winger of Jake Gensel's caliber. Plus, the other aspect is Jake Gensel is a proven playoff performer. He's the type of player that, beyond just he's won a Stanley Cup thing, his playoff numbers are unreal. He's got 34 goals in 58 career playoff games. He had one run where he put up 10 goals and 21 points in in 12 games. The year they won the cup, he had 13 goals in 25 games. I mean, last time the Penguins were in the playoffs, he had 8 goals in 7 games. He's a machine when the playoffs start. And you want to talk about a piece that puts you over the top? It's hard to find. Let me put it this way: he's probably if he moves, he's the best player that is going to get dealt at the deadline. Which I still don't know for certain if the Penguins are actually going to pull the trigger on moving him. But if they do, he's the best piece available at the deadline.
Do you actually, like, I'm not even asking as a bit, do you actually think he's higher than Elias Lindholm? Like, do you think he goes for more? Yeah? Okay. Interesting.
I don't know if he'd actually go for more. They'd probably be similar. I think the reason I would put him over Lindholm, even though I love Lindholm and his two-way chops, is Lindholm's, I just don't know what type of player he is without elite talent. Because, yeah, he had the year where he was point per game, but that's when he was playing next to Gaudreau and Tkachuk, and he was the clear third wheel on the best line in hockey. And he's still, like, to me, Lindholm is for a contender. He's a perfect 2C, so don't get me wrong. He would have a similar type of impact. And it would also sort of, I can get the argument that, okay, you bring him in, then you could keep the Lotto line together. So, I mean, I can be swayed. They're very, very close to me. But I just think Gensel's more of a sure thing in that he's performed at an elite level in the playoffs before. And I think that matters because this Canucks team doesn't have much playoff experience. And if you're looking to make a run, this is a point Frank Saravalli brought up before too. This group doesn't really know what it's like to have to climb back from a 2-0 series deficit and to actually pull it off. They haven't had to wrestle with the challenge of, okay, maybe you're up 3-1 in a playoff series. You drop the next 2 games and now you got a game 7. Do you have the mental fortitude to close it out in a game 7? Whereas Guentzel has those things. He's the type of guy that in a big game 6 or in a big game 7 would come through clutch.
I love that. I love all that explanation you gave it. And again, another thing, like Logan Van Dyke brought it up. He said, well, he's good because he plays with Sidney Crosby, but that's not necessarily true. Like, we've seen Jake Guentzel away from Sidney Crosby, and he's performed fine in those minutes.
And he'd also get to play with Pettersson here, right? So that's another elite talent. Plus, again, I'm telling you, watching him play, it's not just a case of Guentzel riding Crosby's coattails. Seriously, watching Crosby and Guentzel play together is art. It's you want to talk about the peak chemistry that, for instance, Pettersson and Kuzmenko had last season. That's what it would look like for Pettersson and Guentzel all the time. That's how high I am on Guentzel, how smart he is, how well he meshes with elite talent. As the lighting in my room,
what the hell is going on with your camera?
It's not even the camera.
You gotta move
that. Is popping through at a weird angle, and I see light flurries.
RJ, the YouTube live chat said harm with the hot box sesh.
No.
Getting smokier by the minute, said Jeremy Lee, and it cleared up. Thanks for opening a window, Harm. We appreciate it.
I didn't touch anything, so it might come back at like any second.
I wanted to get this Jeff Patterson tweet in, and it's not in the work tape, Grady, so don't scramble. You're good. But this is what Jeff tweeted. It kind of got me thinking about this conversation that you and I are having right now, Harmon, about these targets and all that sort of stuff. Jeff tweeted out, so much focus on Lotto Line's exploits. They've needed the Lotto Line to come through. Kuzmenko, Suter, Mikheyev with 2 assists in 3 games together, and neither point came as a line. Suter set up Höglander at Madison Square Garden. Mikheyev assisted on the Hronek goal against the Islanders, and the second line just hasn't really produced. So as much as the Lotto line's been great, and we've talked about how that second line hasn't really gotten scored on and they haven't been awful by any means, they haven't produced much offense. So that's why this conversation about going out and getting a second line center is kind of a hot topic right now, or at least a top 6 forward, of course. As we know, the top 6 has been a bit of an issue this season, especially when you looked at prior to the Lotto line being together. And we've talked about the matchups before. We're not going to get into all of that. But I wanted to get to this idea from actually we'll save it. We'll save it for anyone else. But Shiv threw out the name Anthony Cirelli. Yeah, Anthony Cirelli would be great too. There's a lot of names out there. There's a lot of names out there, Harmon. And when I say out there, I don't
Tampa's not going to
necessarily
move
mean
him though, unless
exactly.
they're
That's
full tear it down, and which I don't think that's the mode they're in right now.
no. I wonder. And not to divert the conversation too much because I know we want a shorter episode today. But like, I wonder what they're gonna do with Stamkos, man. Like, it feels like there's
Yeah,
just this cone of silence around Steven Stamkos, and I mean, he's not even in the cone. Like, Steven Stamkos doesn't know what's going on, and I feel for that guy. I like Steven Stamkos a lot. There you go, second line center. Boom, go get Steven Stamkos.
he can't play 5-on-5 anymore.
Fine. Okay. Here. Okay. Yes, let's get to the ones that we said were realistic, Harm, because this one,
Yeah,
I wrote down this one. He's kind of in this tier below, but he also might be a little too close to being pie in the sky. But this also might be the pie in Jim Rutherford's office right now. Frank Vetrano was a name that Rick Dollywall threw out today on Donnie and Dolly. He connected the Canucks to Vetrano. He said that he spoke with Vetrano's agent and that the Canucks were in on Frank Vetrano 2 off seasons ago, the summer of 2022, when he eventually signed a 3-year deal with the Anaheim Ducks. He's got a cap hit of $3.65 million, maybe a little more realistic than the Gensel Lindholm tier, but still a point per game player, having a fantastic season in Anaheim. Wouldn't be too hard to fit that cap hit in. And hey, like he'd be a nice addition to this team, I think. Again, like I said, probably in that tier lower. I'd still be shooting for Draisaitl, Eriksson Ek, but in all seriousness, like Frank Vetrano might be a more realistic target. And then I also have Adam Henrique, another guy on the Ducks. I've thrown out his name before as somebody that I'd like to go see them get. Again, I'm not reporting this. I saw one of the Twitter people threw this out like, oh, Quad says the Canucks would like Adam Henrique. I'm like, yeah, no, I would like Adam Henrique, and I think the Canucks might as well. I'm not reporting anything, to be clear. Just 2 names that I kind of think about. Like Dollywall had the report on Vetrano. The Canucks haven't been connected to Henrique, but another name that I'd say he's obviously in that tier below Vetrano, but Vetrano and Henrique, 2 guys that I think might be realistic for the Canucks to go get.
yeah, those are 2 of the players. Like those are 2 of the players that I was thinking of as well. And before we get to Vetrano and Henrique, just because a lot of people have been talking about Jake Gensel today, because I believe it was Emily Kaplan of ESPN that had the report that the Penguins might be looking to deal him at the deadline. Let's address why it's a difficult fit for the Canucks, in my opinion, in terms of the acquisition cost. First of all, it's going to cost you an arm and a leg to get him. First round pick and top prospect, right? Especially given the number of teams that are looking for top 6 help. Like, you don't think the Edmonton Oilers are thinking, man, what could our team look like if we add Jake Gensel to this roster, given that Connor Brown wasn't the fit that we thought he was going to be in the top 6. So let's bring Jake Gensel to play with Leon Draisaitl. And given how much this season and next means for them, like they're going to be, they'd be all in on a piece like Jake Gensel. So, I mean, it's probably, the asking price is probably a first round pick and a top prospect, which in my opinion is too much for a rental. And then you get to the conversation of, okay, but what if you look to extend Gensel? Nylander just signed for $11.5 million. This is just me completely like ballpark, not really having done a close deep dive into it, but wouldn't that make around $10 million the asking price for Gensel on his next deal, given his track record of production? And I'm just going to pull it up here because Nylander before this season hadn't ever been like Nylander's production hadn't been way higher than Gensel before this season. Like Gensel scored 36 goals and 73 points last season. He had 40 goals and 84 points in 76 games the year before, 57 points in 56 games. So he's been in and around that, like producing at a 35 to 40 goal pace while in and around the point per game mark, which you look at William Nylander before this season, that's roughly the territory that he'd been in as well. So what would you be confident paying Jake Gensel a $10 million cap hit on a long-term deal? I don't know if I would. I don't think that I'd be able to stomach that, given what you're going to have to pay Elias Pettersson, given what you're going to have to pay Philip Hronek. Given how much you've already invested in JT Miller, I think then you enter territory of your team's too top heavy, and how are you going to build competent depth? So that's why, even though I love Gensel a lot, I don't know if it's a realistic fit for the Canucks.
For Vetrano, I just want to go back to him because you bring up a really good point with Gensel about the extension. And the more I kind of think about it, and I know I throw out Lindholm a lot, and Lindholm's going to get at least the Horvat, right? Like Bo Horvat's the comparable for Elias Lindholm. So are you prepared to pay that? Probably not, for the same reason that you weren't prepared to pay that to Bo Horvat if you're the Canucks. And with Vetrano, I just look at that extra year as being something that the Canucks might really, really like that. Again, 19 goals and 10 assists through 40 games this year. Those are solid numbers. Like I said, like he was a point per game guy this season. Like I think he could be that guy if he's not playing on Anaheim, right? Like I don't think it's crazy to suggest that if he's playing on the Canucks, he puts up more points. I just wonder, with that cap hit being for next year as well, like if that's something that is a little more enticing for the Canucks to go out and make him their target. I wonder about him. I really wonder about Vetrano.
It's a definite selling point, and I don't think you're looking at him. You kind of have to temper the expectations of what he is, because he's riding a sky high shooting percentage this year. Realistically, he's the type of player that you look at for 20 to 25 goals in a season, 40-ish points. Definitely doesn't have much playmaking impact, but like a complimentary finisher. And what stands out about him is he also had, one positive experience as a sort of rental for the Rangers, where in their trip to the Eastern Conference Final, I think he had 13 points in 20 games, which at least gives you evidence that, okay, he's made a midseason transition work before changing teams, which I think matters, because a lot of times you make a big trade for somebody and they can't click right away. It takes some time to adjust to a new system, to new teammates. And that's the only thing you'd have to be wary of is, you'd want to do deep dive into Vetrano's defensive games, forechecking. You want to make sure that, okay, you can put the puck in the back of the net, but you also got to make sure that he's a fit for the way Rick Tocchet wants to play. So that's the only thing you'd have to be cognizant of. But absolutely, I think the extra year of term is absolutely a huge selling point and feature with somebody like Vetrano.
I'm curious what they're going to end up doing. But yeah, those are my two guys. Like I in terms of realistic cost, like I look at Vetrano. I will have the conversation in the months leading up to the deadline about what it would cost, because I really don't know right now, and I don't really know what I'd be okay parting ways with. I think you got to ask me this closer to the deadline.
Canucks Conversation with Harman and Quads every weekday at 2 p.m. Be sure to check it out on the Canucks Army YouTube channel, and if you missed it, go check it out on your favorite podcast catcher app.